One, jury's come back, and it's hard not to see it, but as a incredible win for Sean Diddy Combs. President Trump keeps winning on the global stage, leading many to suggest he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. But what exactly are we talking about? Where are the victories? Literally all over the globe. Two, they're coming for you. But who is they? The author of a brand new book, Jason Chaffetz. Three, Yogi Berra, did you know, was involved in the D-Day operation? We talk to his granddaughter. It is Will Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Every Monday through Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, set a reminder, head over to Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe. We broadcast on radio stations coast to coast across this great United States of America. And yesterday, we welcomed in a brand new affiliate. In Buffalo, WBBN. Tinfoil Pat suggests to us right before show kickoff that I got that wrong yesterday. Well, I'm always welcome in criticism, and I'm open to being corrected. I don't remember getting this wrong yesterday. WBEN in Buffalo, New York. But you're telling me that I said WBBN in Buffalo, New York.
That's what it sounded like, and we actually have the clip if Justin wants to play it for us, so we can kind of get to the bottom of this.
Let's check the tape. Markets across this great United States of America, and welcoming in today, WBBN in Buffalo, New York. Welcome to the Will Cain Show. It's close. Say B and E real fast. B E. Add the W. There's a lot of B sounds. WBBN.
Yeah. It could easily be done. Yes. I thought that's what you did initially, and then going back through it, I'm like, well, maybe. So, it is what it is.
It's a bit of a tongue twister, Buffalo. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but we're going to get it right, even if I didn't get it wrong, or even it's understandable that I got it wrong. Anyway, it's not your fault. It's my fault. Or anyways, it's nobody's fault, in the famous words of Royal Tenenbaum. We welcome everybody in, though, coast to coast across this great United States of America. And there was big news earlier today as the 2-month-long trial of Sean Diddy Combs came back today. The verdict from the jury. Story number one. I think I'll just sit here and wait and see how long it takes for Justin to hit the sounder. Let me try again. Ready? Story number one. It's a couple. 2-a-days. What's going on, Justin? Is it a new sound? 2-a-days Dan is in Dallas. He's not working the show today. Justin's filling in. Thought I could ignore that and just roll on, or I could lean into the moment. And then you'd play the whole new sound, Justin. Is that what you're going to pioneer when you're filling in for Dan? Okay. All right, let's do it. Ready? Let's do it again together. We'll see which sound you come up with. Story number one. Nailed it. The jury has come back in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Not guilty on 3 of the 5 charges against him. Unable to reach a consensus. Guilty on 2 charges. The potential charges facing Sean Diddy Combs were count 1, racketeering. Count 2, sex trafficking. Count 3, transportation for prostitution. Count 4, another charge of sex trafficking. Count 5, another charge of transportation for prostitution. Racketeering carried with it, by the way, a potential life sentence. Sex trafficking, 15 to life. Transportation for prostitution, up to 10 years in prison. The jury was only able to come back with a guilty verdict on 2 counts, both of which were transportation for prostitution. No consensus, no conviction. on racketeering and 2 counts of sex trafficking. The details of the case you've become somewhat familiar with. Freak-offs, parties, women paid to come hang out, have days worth of sex, drug-fueled orgies. And the jury found that most of that behavior, it was argued by the defense, and the jury seemed to buy, was part of a personal lifestyle choice, swinging, voyeurism, and not criminal behavior. The witnesses and the victims claimed they were coerced into this behavior, leading to the charges of sex trafficking. That required force, coercion into this behavior. But by not finding a guilty verdict, beyond a reasonable doubt, the jury did not believe that this behavior and these individuals were forced into these situations, that it was consensual lifestyle behavior, leaving them only with prostitution charges, prostitution verdicts for Diddy. Now he has 2 counts of that, again, each of them carrying up to 10 years in prison. If they serve consecutively, I guess that could add up to 20 years in prison. Often your sentences can either be consecutive or concurrent. Concurrent means they run at the same time. And I just, no way to look at this other than it's a pretty big victory for Sean Diddy Combs and a pretty big loss for the prosecution. And I think it is part of a bit of a larger story. And you got to be careful drawing larger stories from a criminal trial because these are about the minutia, the details, the facts that lead one to believe something beyond a reasonable doubt. But it is undoubtedly true that the prosecution, in retrospect, and people were saying it during the trial, even before the trial, overcharged Combs. Racketeering would be almost impossible for them to prove. And it has happened on numerous occasions where these crimes of morality, often things involving sex, take on a life of their own in our public discussion, certainly on social media. Whether or not that's Bob Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, visiting a massage parlor that ends happily, ending up with sex trafficking investigation and charges that were ultimately dropped, or any number of other more salacious conversations in our public sphere. They take on a life of their own and they run to the extreme. And when they gather a lot of attention in the media, even on social media, you'll have prosecutors pursue charges where honestly the available facts and certainly the available evidence and the ability to prove what everyone begins to believe anecdotally, conversationally, can't be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury in this case seems to believe that what Diddy did, certainly no one endorses or isn't suggested to be moral behavior. And being found not guilty is not the same thing as being deemed innocent. Those are 2 very different things. But what we believe, what we see, what we read is not the same thing as provable criminality. And I think it's important to think about that on any number of stories, you know. It's not that you and I have to be a jury. When a story comes up about Jeffrey Epstein or who's on his plane, right? We don't have to behave as a jury and believe something beyond a reasonable doubt to know that it's true. But when we ask for accountability with a politician, whoever may be, that's accused of immoral behavior, you have to understand that level of accountability is different than what we believe and what we talk about. And that's the way our system is built. And the reason that our system is built that way is because the power of the government is overwhelming against the individual. So when the government, i.e. the prosecution, marshaling all of its powers of investigative abilities with the police department, with their own private investigators, with the endless bucket of tax dollars to go after an individual, we require the presumption of innocence and then a proof beyond a reasonable doubt for a criminal defendant. And sometimes the tail can wag the dog on these things. When you see a prosecution like this, on issues of morality specifically, which almost always, not always, but often go back to sex, You could see this coming with Diddy. You know, there's a difference again. Well, I say this just between me and you sitting here talking about today. Put ourselves in that jury box. And you have to ask, what are the allegations? What are the charges? What are the elements of the charges? What is the evidence support on those charges? And did that get proved beyond a reasonable doubt? It's kind of wild when you think about it, when you compare it to, for example, the Karen Reed trial, you know, where she was found not guilty as well. And what they did in that case, you know, we talked about at the time, the way the human mind works, I find this fascinating, is it doesn't work according to the standards that I just gave you. It just doesn't. Even a jury, you're probably listening right now or watching somewhere going, BS, I know what is true. You know, I don't apply this beyond a reasonable doubt standard to what I know to be true. And you're right. And in many cases, that's the way a jury behaves as well. Just because you sat in a jury box doesn't mean all of a sudden you become a priest at the church of legal standard beyond a reasonable doubt. No, the way our brains work is actually we need to believe a different story. We're going to believe something. We're uncomfortable with I don't know. We're uncomfortable leaving things unresolved. We need to believe something. And so what you saw really in both of these cases is the defense offer the jury something else to believe. In the case of Diddy, it was, he's a rapper. He lives a lifestyle. It's not to be endorsed. It's not that it's moral. He's into swinging. He's into orgies. He's into multiple parties. He's into voyeurism, watching other people have sex. But that doesn't make him a criminal. They argued all the parties involved consented. In many cases, paid, thus the prostitution conviction. But that doesn't mean it was coerced or sex trafficking or much more racketeering. They gave the jury a different thing to believe. As did Karen Reed, this entire story about conspiracy, about the police department actually killing her boyfriend or members of the police department, and then engaging in a conspiracy to pin it on Karen Reed. In the end, they didn't ask the jury whether or not really this had been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. They gave the jury something else to believe. And I think that's pretty interesting when you think about the way we digest stories, the way we digest news, the way we come to conclusions. And today, that's for the victory. He'll still go to prison. We'll see for how long. But in the context of what it could have been, a victory for Sean Diddy Combs. Yesterday here on Will Cain Country, former chief counsel for the House Judiciary Committee under Democrats, Julian Epstein, said something that really stuck out to me. And it was about what President Donald Trump has accomplished through the first 100 and some odd days of his presidency, but notably over the last 30 days, the last month of his presidency, specifically when it comes to foreign policy. Listen.
Trump got in, as he did with Pakistan and India early, and has prevented another conflict from spiraling out of control. I mean, these are huge things that occurred. India, Pakistan, Iran, Israel, Rwanda, Congo. These are huge things that happen on the global scene that the president, I say this is a Democrat, maybe a dissident Democrat, President Trump deserves just a huge amount of credit for.
In the news today that President Trump seems to be pushing and getting accomplished, very close to, a peace deal between Israel and Hamas to end the war in Gaza, wind it down. I believe the time frame is over the next month or so. And that's an incredible series of victories, like truly incredible when you step back for a moment and think about those conflicts which were just laid out by Julian Epstein. India and Pakistan, you remember that news story where it was close a couple weeks ago as they were trading missiles and bullets. And we broke down what it looked like potentially for two nuclear powers in India and Pakistan to be on the verge of war yet again. But peace negotiated in part by President Donald Trump. Africa always on the verge of some genocidal massacre, and one that's been ongoing for decades, and brings them both into the Oval Office and negotiates peace. It's hard not to look at Iran and Israel as anything but a massive victory on all fronts. All of these things have to play out. We have to see, as Philip Seymour Hoffman said in Charlie Wilson's War, we'll see. We'll see what's next. But these are massive accomplishments, as would be potential for peace between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. And this absolutely does lead you towards seeing President Donald Trump, a president that puts America first as his guiding light ideology, put victories on the board across the world, across the globe. There still is Ukraine and Russia. At this point, whatever the timeline may be, do you doubt that he'll be able to bring peace at some point to that ongoing conflict? And you just ask yourself about the way we spent the previous 4 years, the hand-wringing over the past month on both the left and the right. And yeah, I do think it adds up to not just the Nobel Peace Prize, which would be astounding for that to be awarded to President Donald Trump, but it would be completely deserved. And put him in the conversation along with the domestic economic policies really to be talked about as one of the best presidents in the history of the United States. They're coming for you. But who is they? Jason Chaffetz has written a new book entitled They're Coming for You. So let's ask him that question when we come back on Will Cain Country.
I'm Charles Payne. Listen to my Unstoppable Prosperity podcast so I can get you making money right now. 35 years on Wall Street taught me how to successfully invest in the stock market. In my 4-part series, I'm going to teach you too. Some of Fox Business's finest join me to help tell my story, impart crucial lessons from my Unstoppable Prosperity book, and to give you the tools to achieve your own financial dreams.
Listen anytime, everywhere at foxbusinesspodcast.com or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Fox News Audio presents Unsolved with James Patterson. Every crime tells a story, but some stories are left unfinished.
The thing that I'm so afraid of is I don't know how much evidence is left to even point the finger at the true person.
Best-selling mystery author James Patterson takes listeners into the core of some of America's most haunting mysteries. Real cases, real people. The Unsolved with James Patterson podcast. Listen and follow now at foxtruecrime.com. From around the world,
Trey Yingst, joining us from Tel Aviv, Israel.
To Washington,
I'm Mike Emanuel.
To your own backyard. If a story impacts you or your wallet, we're on it. It's the Fox News Rundown. We give every story the deeper look it deserves with must-listen interviews and smart analysis from the voices you can trust. Start your day with the Fox News Rundown. Listen and follow now at foxnewsrundown.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Who is they? That's always a good question to ask whenever you're sitting around at a backyard barbecue and they say, well, they're behind it. Who is they? Ask that question this 4th of July. It's Will Cain Country streaming live at foxnews.com on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. Jason Chaffetz is the host of Jason in the House, and he has a brand new book out entitled They're Coming for You. So he seems well placed to answer that question for us, Jason. Who is they?
Oh, you've got these subversive groups that don't like Trump. They don't like conservatives. They want to fundamentally change our country. They take the form of non-government organizations. They take the form of the deep state within the bowels of our federal government. And then there are these woke corporations that also don't like what Donald Trump, conservatives, and MAGA supporters do and what they believe in. So they're going to come after you in mass, and that's the thesis of the book.
So the they is corporations, deep state, NGOs.
Yeah.
I would assume maybe education, higher education.
Education in a big way. Hollywood, they want to fundamentally change you from the moment you're a kid. You know, a lot of, we highlight in the book, for instance, in California in particular, a lot of kids get a computer and it's, a parent thinks, oh, that's great. Oh, I get this free computer. I get a Chromebook from Google. Isn't that nice? But guess what? All that data is being sucked up, gobbled up, packaged, sold, analyzed. They get to keep all the data. And that's the scary part. Doge and Elon Musk, we've highlighted a lot, hundreds of billions of dollars, waste, fraud, and abuse. The hole that hasn't been plugged is all the data. And the data long-term is even more valuable because that stays with you in perpetuity. It doesn't go away. You combine facial recognition with all of these components about your life. I mean, like, well, you've probably had a discussion perhaps with your wife about, hey, let's get a new couch. Maybe we could put a couch over here. And the next thing you know, what shows up in all of your ads? Ads for couches, right? But it's deeper and it's much more subversive than just good marketing.
Oh, that's definitely happened. I mean, it's shocking to me. It's Instagram that I notice that the most with. I talk about something and next, I got an ad feed in Instagram for whatever it is I've been talking about. And we know that it listens. But you say it's much more subversive than that. How? I mean, you're right. I see that and I'm perturbed and for a minute I'm disturbed. But it is sort of like dismissed in your brain as, well, that's the new wave, the new style, the new world of marketing.
Right. But what they're doing is they're creating essentially a social credit score. They're debanking people. They went after Melania Trump and Barron Trump, but they also went after the meat and poultry industry. You go talk to a cattleman, they'll tell you they have a hard time getting banking relationships out there. They had Choke Point, it's Operation Choke Point 1.0 and 2.0. If you bought a gun, if you shopped at Cabela's, if you bought a MAGA hat, they know all this data. And if this creates
who's they on that?
Well,
who is they? I mean, I'm being serious. I'm not being cute. Like, okay, no. I believe all that data is being collected like you point out. I do, but so what? Where's it going? Who's they?
The Federal Reserve created a standard on reputational risk. And so they'll evaluate a bank or a credit union, and based on their reputational risk, that is their customer base, they give different rates. And these are the regulators. And now, just in the last 5 or 6 days, they said the Federal Reserve said they're going to throttle this back a little bit. You can only attribute that to Donald Trump and the pressure the Trump administration's putting there. But they're doing this in a way to make sure that you are not a full participant in the system. You may not be able to see certain things. How you vote is also part of it. They created, when I say they, the Tides Foundation, Bill Gates, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, George Soros's group, they supported a group called Vote ER. And it was led by this group that expanded to 50,000 medical professionals that were targeting people that were in the hospitals. And they had this, we're just trying to get maximum number of people to vote. But, Will, what they do is they went and literally went to patients, even patients we documented in psychiatric hospitals, and they were saying, hey, do you vote? Maybe you should register to vote here. Well, look, once you get that person's name, address, telephone, and you take their facial recognition, all these other factors, they can pretty well target and say, this is a 90% chance that this is a Democrat. They want to get those people out to vote. In this case of Kansas, through that effort, they sent 65,000 texts out to push on the abortion vote that they had there in Kansas. And there's lots of other examples of this. So they're doing it for the voting. They're doing it to push you out of the economy, to make life more expensive, and to just flat out debank you. If you purchase a gun, you're on their target list because they don't want you to participate as fully in the economy as somebody who's a bit more woke.
Okay, so I just want to follow up on this gun one for a moment because I thought I found that pretty illustrative. So the Federal Reserve creates a reputational risk credit system for banks.
Yes.
That means the Federal Reserve is looking at banks' portfolios, I would assume, primarily, yes. What kind of loans they're making, yes. Right? But you're arguing as well the reputational risk of their customer base, which I assume they would filter through the language of how secure those potential customers are to repay loans or to do whatever it may be, right?
Right.
And they set the profiles. What is a higher reputational risk? What is a lower reputational risk? And if your bank has a customer base that is a higher reputational risk, they charge you a higher interest rate, that bank. So then that bank is paying more, and they're disincentivized to then serve that customer who is forcing up their reputational risk. And the customers, you're saying, that are the ones pushing up the reputational risk are meat producers, gun buyers, this type of thing?
Yeah. Literally, if you've shopped at Cabela's, they know that because they're surfing through all the data and they say, oh, Cabela's, that you're not the kind of customer. You create a reputational risk. And so you may not be able to get a loan. You may say, wait, how did I not qualify? I got a great credit score. It's not just your credit score, your ability to pay or your history of payment. What they're looking at are all these other factors. And again, this is the type of subversive thing. It's much more nefarious than doing this. And it shows up in Hollywood, shows up in your medical records. It shows up in whether or not you can buy an insurance product. We highlight, for instance, automobiles, which at this point in life, they are just rolling computers with wheels on them, right? They're taking all that information. What are you listening to on the radio? Are you streaming something? How often do you look to the left or the right? Do you come to a full and complete stop? How fast are you going? And where do you go? Again, these insurance companies are able to gobble this up, and law enforcement is as well. And this is wrong, all right? But you would have to get a probable cause, a warrant, or an articulable suspicion for law enforcement to go after somebody. But they buy and sell this data, and they figure, hey, if we buy it from a data broker, then we can go find out everything about you. Now, it's great when we're chasing a criminal, but it's wrong. Like the example I use is in Florida. Florida used to be that when you go to get your driver's license, they would get your name, address, telephone, height, weight, hair color, whether or not you wear glasses. You were paying to get that driver's license, and then the state of Florida was selling that information to a data broker. And they, again, combine this with the tens of billions of photos out there. So there's a group called Clearview AI. Not saying they did anything illegal, but they scrape the internet. Anytime Will Cain goes out there, maybe on Venmo or social media, they're building a profile, and they probably have, in your case, probably thousands upon thousands of your photos. And keep in mind, there's 500 plus 1,000 cameras in this country that are taking your public information, and they're buying and selling this data. They've created a profile where they can tell exactly who you are, your propensity to vote, where you're going to vote, sexual preferences are on this list. This is the type of thing that's happening in real time.
Okay, so I just want to keep pursuing this for 1 second. So I have no doubt that what you're laying out is true. Okay, all this data is out there.
Yeah.
It's being collected at the retail level by whoever I interact with, right? Everything I interact with, every purchase I make on a credit card, even the store itself collects the data often. I always try to say, whatever, can we get your phone number, email address? I always want to go, what for? But mostly that's because I don't want to get a bunch of spam in my email address, right?
Right.
But I know they're collecting all that information, and then I assume at a very high level, meaning like percentage-wise, selling it on to a data company, right? They're making an extra revenue stream by taking all of this information and selling it on to a data company. That data company is then creating a profile, but that's getting enhanced more and more by other data companies that can combine that information with what you point out, the AI element, the picture element, and so you get a profile of me out there. Now I want to take it back how it comes back down to me. So far, I'm still like, I get it and I don't like it, but I don't know how it negatively impacts my life, Jason, right? And this is what you've written about. And this is how you're squaring this circle. We all kind of know what we just described right there. There is a profile of all of us on the internet in some data cloud. Then the question is, how are they using that? At a most innocuous level, here's what I would believe, Jason. Okay, let's go back to the car insurance company, right? They're going to insure me for whatever it is that I want to buy, a car, a motorcycle, or whatever. They're going to go get that data from these data companies that have a risk profile or a profile of me, and they're going to run that through a risk analysis, right? Yeah. They're going to see guys that do X, Y, and Z, Will checks the boxes on X, Y, and Z, are more propensity for speeding or wreck, so he should pay a higher rate or whatever it may be. And it makes sense from a business perspective. But tell me when it crosses over into nefarious. Like if they start saying, and just for argument's sake, let's say Will listens to Alex Jones, and that makes its way into my profile. Somehow that data is collected. And I don't know how that data would or would not get collected. Is my car listening to me, to your point, or my Spotify? Maybe Spotify is selling that information on. I don't know. But that gets into my cloud profile, which it probably is, whatever I listen to, or like you said, watch.
Right.
And then what? The insurance company goes, people that listen to Alex Jones are generally less safe on the road, raise his rates.
So, again, I believe it is more nefarious than just good marketing or insurance companies trying to do the right thing to get to the right price point. Think of how much money the government has. By the way, the data brokerage industry is about a $400 billion a year industry just here in the United States. That's how much money is flowing back and forth on this. But what I think people will be shocked when they read the book, they're coming for you, is how much the government is collecting that data and then selling that data. So that affects your ability to get health care, where you get health care. They believe that they can anticipate whether you're gay or straight, not that that should necessarily matter, whether or not you're going to an AA clinic or doing something else like that. But then the government is using that to subvert the natural process. And we highlight Executive Order 14019, Biden in March, right after he takes office. What do? They go out and they create this executive order to target people on getting out the vote for elections. That is fundamentally wrong at its core. And they're using information that only the government has and that only Democrats can see. But they're also going to create a series.
Well, help me understand that.
Yeah.
Take me from the data collection company and profile building company.
Right.
You made a leap to the government. Now, I'm sure the government has a ton of data on me, right? The tax data, everything on its own, through its own collection mechanisms. But I have called the DMV, Jason. I know what it's like to try to break through the government and to believe they're doing something well and efficient. Right. Now, spying, they seem to do pretty decently. So I believe the government has a profile of me. My suspicion would be, Jason, the private industries data profile, like you just mentioned, the AI profile, the credit score, all that is probably more robust. I don't know. I could be wrong on that. But are you telling me the government is going into private and getting their stuff as well? How would they do that? How do you do that? Can they buy it? They have to have a warrant? Like, how are they getting the private data?
Well, this is how they bypass that. They bypass it by purchasing it. Here's some of the most salacious and the worst things that are out there. Well, I haven't been in Congress for 8 years, but when I was chairman of the Oversight Committee, we had hearings about how facial recognition is just off the charts in terms of gathering that information. But in addition to that, they're using other things like backscatter machines. A backscatter machine can roll by your house in a vehicle, and they can see through the wall to understand which room you're in. They are using cell phone simulators out there. You can do geofencing.
Hold on. Because I found that fascinating. We said, who's they? I can't believe the local police department has that. Do they have that technology you just described?
Oh, some of them do. What I was worried about, it sounds great when the FBI has it and they're trying to, hunt down a kidnapper or something like that. And, you're watching a movie and you're like, how'd they do that? Oh, that's awesome. But it's not that. Why does the IRS, for instance, and this is like 10 years ago, they had Stingrays. These are simulated cell phone towers. They would put them on airplanes and gobble up everybody's telephone number in a certain area. Well, now it's so conventionally available that think about a drug cartel. If you said, Will Cain lives at this address, I can buy from a data broker every phone that came within 100 feet of your home for the last 2 months or however long I wanted. I can tell everybody that has come to your house. And then from there, once I've gleaned that information, I can then go much deeper into that. I just believe you have a fundamental right to privacy. And these backscatter...
Wait, but in that situation, you said a drug cartel could do it. So you're not talking about just a government with a surveillance warrant getting that information. Anybody can get that information.
Social Security Department had this stuff. The IRS had this stuff. Now, look, if they're pursuing somebody and they have a warrant, then that's how we do things. You've got to work with the sheriff and go get this stuff. But you don't collect your DNA and your fingerprints when you're born. I just believe you have a fundamental right to privacy from the get-go. Let me give you another quick example. I don't want to run out of time. If you go to Times Square right now, Meta is doing an ad with Ray-Ban. And I detail in the book how these two MIT students have built these glasses for less than $200 and are now being commercially available. They can take AI, and you can't see what they're seeing, but AI is so quick to do facial recognition. I could walk down the street and say, hey, there's Bob Jones, but I didn't know Bob Jones. And then his profile and his background and all of his facial recognition. And, oh, he went to Cornell. Oh, he's an anthropologist. He wrote a paper on the brontosaurus. And you can have this conversation and have all of that data and information right there on your eyeball instantaneously, and the other person is oblivious to it. That technology is here right now today and is being commercialized.
Seriously, I can buy those Ray-Bans that you're talking about right now?
Go to Meta. That's what they're selling.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And so what I believe, there are solutions to this, Will. I think in this country you should have the right to be forgotten. When you're a 13-year-old in this country, you can enter into a contract with a social media company. But they shouldn't be able in perpetuity for the rest of your life be able to monetize your data. Why can't you end that contract? I know of no other contract where it's a lifetime contract. Hey, I don't want to give you any more information. You got to stop using mine, right? That's usually what happens at the conclusion of a contract. But that's not what's happening now. And so if you think that they're just going to allow Trump and conservative and MAGA people to just glide off into the sunset and not be, that is not, doxing is happening. Why do you think the ICE officers are having to cover their face? It's because they know if they give up their face, these guys can track them down. They can go to their house. They can start to do some really bad things and make life difficult, and they scare the living daylights out of them. This is all happening real time right now.
Doesn't it feel, Jason, a little bit like the famous parable, whatever, plugging your finger in the hole of a dam? Like the dam is breaking. Yeah. Like I appreciate what you said about ending the concept of a lifetime contract, right, that I could opt out. But if we took a survey of either of our lives, how many different contracts have I signed? And everybody listening is like, well, I haven't signed it. No, you do every time you do a credit card transaction or every time you buy a ticket to an amusement park. There's always the writing on the back, right? The internet terms of service agreement that you didn't want to take the time to read, that you just clicked accept, right? I mean, thousands of contracts, thousands upon thousands that we're all subjected to when it comes to this data. Like, I don't know. Like, that sounds nice what you said, but opting out of all this, I can't get, Jason, I've tried to unsubscribe to the spam in my email folder, and it's like, that's a dam you can't plug.
But this is where Congress can actually do something. Remember when we redid the labels on food? Why can't we do redo the labeling so there's clear and concise information about what is being bought and what is being sold? And if Congress had the aptitude to do it and be able to be crystal clear, I think most people would be appalled. That's why, look, this is why I wrote the book. They're coming for you, because if you're oblivious to it, you can just stick your head in the sand. And I think most people do say, I give up a little bit of privacy, but man, is it convenient. And I love watching those cat videos on Instagram. But I'm telling you, what they're doing and where it's going with your iris and everything else and where you look, Apple on your phone right now here today, you can go and turn this off, but they can gauge what you're doing on your phone based on where your eyeball goes, whether your pupil expands or contracts. It's scary how good and sophisticated they are. And I would argue that they're using it for very nefarious tactics. It's not just, hey, I'm doing a better job at selling you a couch.
Well, okay, that's where I want you to you've already sold the book, trust me. Like, this is fascinating and scary and all these things. Yeah. They're coming for you. But I want you to bring this home in a way, Jason. Like, we all at this point understand what we're trading away.
Yeah.
But even me, it's like, but what in the end is the price that I have to pay? You know what I mean? Like, okay, they're collecting all this information on me. They have all this information on me. Right. I'm not doing anything wrong. So what do I care? You know, I'm not breaking the law. You know, I don't know, whatever. But I think that the final leg of this race is explaining to me and to the American people how it is impacting our lives. I mean, I hear you on it. It can affect your insurance rates. It could affect your ability to bank and these kind of things. But I still think for 80 or 90% of us listening out there, we're going to go, yeah, but I don't see how it's negatively impacting my life.
I think so much is going on behind the scenes that you don't see. Once you read the book, you'll be like, oh my gosh. I mean, they're gauging what your gait is like, how you walk, because they want to be able to tell a lot of things about you. And the future looks like China, where China has, have millions of these cameras, and then they limit where you can go and at what time can you go. And then the other thing that I think young people and old people, I mean, everybody's got to think about is where we're going with deep fakes. Because deep fakes are, again, imagine how good, we've all seen on our phones how good those deep fakes are. Imagine where we're going to be 2 years from now. And even though the technology can do a lot of things, we better step back as a people and say, do we really want to do that? And how are we going to protect that 14-year-old girl or boy, whatever it is? How are you going to protect your kids in that future and what they're growing up with? Because I just think it's going to be used for extortion, and it's going to be used. They have so much on you that inevitably somebody's done something wrong. And is that going to really have to live with you for the rest of your life? You better be able to put that genie back in the bottle. And that scares me, particularly for the young generation who has, that's that they grew up with.
It's, you bring up an interesting point there at the end, like, you said you have a right to be forgotten.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like, one thing everybody listening can rest assured of is everyone's made mistakes and is making them actively. There are parts of your life that you do not want public. And increasingly, those parts of your life that you do privately are on your phone. Increasingly more and more, right? Whatever you look at, whatever you search, whatever you query, all of these things are there. And if none of it is ever forgotten, we're asking, I see this going one of two ways, Jason. So whoever is extorted, right? So if the issue is not criminality, but embarrassment, right? And that's more applicable to most people listening. Like, I'm not breaking the law. No, but could you be embarrassed? And what would the embarrassment price be? Keep you from getting a job, keep you from running for office, keep you from doing whatever it is you want. This is before the Chinese credit score system, because that's another leap in America. Even though they know my gait and they know my movements, the minute that a government official says, well, Will has a pass to only walk in these areas, that's a huge bridge for us to cross in America. Like, we're not the Chinese Communist Party, and I don't believe we're on the doorstep of that. Although I wouldn't put it beyond the realm of possibility, I don't think we're on the doorstep of that. But I do think extortion, embarrassment, and the requirement of purity of others is a real interesting concept. Like, no matter what it is, and it's easy to go, well, I'm never going to run for office. But I don't think it's just about people trying to run for office. Purity is what is demanded. And we've seen elements of that. Like, I used to do this when I was in sports, Jason. A guy gets drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, and they go back through his Twitter feed and find something he said when he was 14 years old and rake him over the coals, embarrass him, even hurt his contract value, right? But that times a million is what you're talking about. That times a million is the potential for embarrassment. And it goes one of two ways. We're going to, I guess, ask everybody in the public light to be a fraud or to be perfect. I say fraud because you just hide your imperfections in some way. Or we become more forgiving. Like, the more all of this is exposed, and I know that's utopian or that's like wishful thinking, but we all recognize that it could be done to us and how fallible we all are, and we just become more forgiving. And in fact, that's almost what we've done with Donald Trump. Like, everything about him has been exposed, and not all of it is flattering, right, that he's ever done. And we move past it, and we don't require him to be perfect.
Yeah, you and I walk down the street. We're on Fox. Do our podcasts. You give up stuff to be in the public eye. But what about the person who doesn't want to be famous, who doesn't want to be known? And then they put the other people are wearing glasses, and then you can look over and you can read everything about that person instantaneously. That's a scary world. What happens when Google Earth is live? What if you say, hey, I want to zoom in on this? There's a case in California about Barbra Streisand. And the California Supreme Court ruled that only in your bedroom do you have any safety, security from prying eyes. So they ruled that Barbra Streisand, if she was in her backyard, if she was in her kitchen, if she was in her family room, if she was wherever, they could put a helicopter or a drone and spy on her all the time. Now, you could argue that Barbra Streisand's different because she's this high-level celebrity, but why should we give up all that privacy? We better think those things through, because that can be pervasive, and it's going to be scary. It's going to lead to, like you said, extortion. It's going to lead to crime. It's going to lead to all kinds of things. And look, Donald Trump highlighted this in the last joint session of Congress, that young woman who was, the deep fake, and how she's contemplating suicide, for goodness sake. And she fortunately overcame it, but this is real, folks, and it's happening right now.
Well, that's really scary stuff. It really is.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can rely on Congress to fix it, as you suggest.
Amen to that. Yeah.
And it's only whatever you and I are talking about, and you know it after having written this book at such a higher level, it's only still scratching the surface, because you talked about those glasses and what it can tell the wearer about the person they're interacting with. But think about that data being sucked up again into that profile cloud and sharing it even more about the person they're looking at or the person doing the looking. It's like the concept of privacy is gone. Like, that's a word that loses its place in society. There's nothing private.
Have you seen on the internet, there's a guy, he puts on this mask. The one I saw was Walter White, from the
Yeah, I have. I almost asked you about that.
I
wondered how
his face, and it's unbelievable.
Yes.
Like, it actually looks like the character Walter White from Breaking Bad. And I think...
And they're real cheap, like mesh masks. They don't look fancy like in Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. They're like, you stretch
like
this
a nylon stocking.
Netting.
Yeah.
Nylon netting over your head, and now so what is your point? We're all going to start wearing those masks so that we're never recognizable?
There are people that they are marketing this stuff because people think it's funny. Maybe it's good at, Halloween. But there comes a point where you can't just hide in a closet. We got to live our lives. But I just want people to be aware, because I think if there's awareness, there will be a lot of social pressure to push back on how pervasive this is going to be. But I do think that this creates huge problems for law enforcement, for people that want to be extorted, for the criminal element, for the targeting of ICE officers. That's happening in real time right now. There's a 700% increase in attacks on ICE officers. There's a reason why they're masking up and doing all that. I fear for it, and I think young people are really the most vulnerable at this point.
One last question, Jason. The world you're describing already exists to some extent. What you told us about, like with the ability to see inside your house. So how does anyone get away with a crime? Like right now, it seems like we've got enough of this stuff that there shouldn't be people out there wanted.
Right. Well, I visited with somebody who is, touted themselves as an AI expert, and that's what they're doing. They're going to these local law enforcement, and they're training them, and they're teaching them, and they're putting out contracts to say, hey, you've got somebody on your target list, give us that, we'll be the bounty hunters, we can use all these tools, and then we can just hand these criminals to you. You got to pay us this. I think that bounty hunting industry is just going to go to the moon, and I hope so. Because when you take down a criminal or a kidnapper or some, pervert or something, everybody's cheering. That's the good use of, for instance, this product, Clearview AI. That's what they were trying to do. It's when it tips over the other side and says, oh, that cute girl that over there that I want to get to know, let me learn everything about her and her movements and where she goes. And then I'll figure out a way to do something. That's when you've gone to the other side of that teeter-totter that's dangerous.
Incredible. All right, they're coming for you. It's a new book by Jason Chaffetz. I think it's self-explanatory through the course of this conversation. You're going to want to read what he's written there. Incredible. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks.
Great conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Check him out as well at Jason in the House, podcast at Fox News Podcast. They're coming for you. All right. Lindsay Berra is the granddaughter of Yogi Berra. She's part of a new Fox Nation special, Field of Valor. And she tells us about not his baseball career, but the stories about her grandfather, Yogi Berra, coming up on Will Cain Country.
Every hour of every day, Fox News Radio is there with the latest breaking news and information you rely on.
This is a Fox News alert.
I'm Lisa Brady.
I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News.
With Fox News correspondents around the globe.
At the White House, Simon Owen in London.
On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The news that matters most to you. The top headlines, all in one place. Listen and follow the Fox News Hourly Update at foxnewspodcasts.com or ask your smart speaker to play Fox News.
It's Rachel Campos-Duffy. Join me for Fox Noticias, a show that breaks down the news of the day with a focus on the kitchen table issues that matter most to our community. Politics, the economy, immigration, and cultural trends. Weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on Fox Deportes and available at noticias.foxnews.com, the Fox Noticias YouTube page, and Fox Nation. Or listen and follow the podcast at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
It's Will Cain Country.
The two guys on Trigonometry say we can't even get leftists to come onto our podcast. I know that I have trouble booking leftists for debate because they don't want to debate. They don't want to converse. They want to enforce their viewpoint.
Watch it live at noon Eastern, Monday through Thursday at foxnews.com or on the Fox News YouTube channel. And don't miss the show. Listen and follow the podcast 5 days a week at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts.
Did you know Yogi Berra, part of Operation Overlord, D-Day? It's Will Cain Country, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. We hope you'll hit subscribe at Apple or on Spotify. Lindsay Berra is the granddaughter of Major League Baseball legend Yogi Berra. A new Fox Nation special, Fields of Valor, a series, focuses episode 1 on Yogi Berra. And before he became a baseball legend, what he did for this country on the beaches in the historic day of D-Day. And Lindsay joins us now. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, Will. How are you?
Good. Glad to have you on the show. So I didn't know this about your granddad. I didn't know. Tell me about him and D-Day.
And you worked in sports, right? And you didn't know. And
yes.
I think is crazy. So I'm excited that this new series is highlighting this part of Grandpa's life. He basically lived a life before he became a Yankee legend. And part of that involved his service in the U.S. Navy during World War II.
Yeah, what did he do? So just give me a little bit about the stories and what he did during World War II.
My grandfather he had his first professional baseball contract. He was playing for the Norfolk Tars in the Piedmont League. He had signed that contract for the 1943 season. A little perspective, he signed it for $90 a month, and he would have gotten a $500 bonus had he stayed the whole year. But he turned 18 on May 12th, 1943, and he literally walked himself over to the big naval base in Norfolk and enlisted before he had a chance to be drafted. He felt it was his duty to serve his country. And I like to say only my grandpa Yogi could be bored in basic training. So they came around and asked for volunteers for a secret mission, which ended up being the rocket boats, training for the amphibious assault of Normandy, basically during the D-Day invasion. And he ended up as a machine gunner on an LCSS, Landing Craft Support Small, which came off of a larger boat, the USS Bayfield. They had 12 rockets on either side, twin 50 caliber machine guns on the back, and he was a machine gunner providing cover fire for our troops going ashore in the D-Day invasion, and then later in Operation Overlord, which was the invasion of southern France, and again in North Africa. He did a lot before he put on the pinstripes.
Wow. Tell me more about the machine gunner at Normandy. So these crafts you talk about. So were they off the shore as men stormed the beaches providing cover fire for them, or did they actually make landing as well on the beach?
He didn't make the landing. They were a couple hundred yards off the beach, and his job was to shoot at anything that came below the clouds. And it was, they were providing that blanket of fire so our troops could more safely get ashore. We obviously know it wasn't safe in any way. But they had planes to contend with, those big German 88 guns up in the hills, just trying to give our guys a chance. And then after the beach was secure, he was on the water for 10 days, and he had the very unenviable task of pulling the bodies of our downed servicemen out of the water. If that doesn't change someone, I don't know what does. But yeah, and then he actually took, it might've been in Southern France. We're not actually sure. He took either a bullet or a piece of shrapnel through his hand, and qualified for the Purple Heart, but actually declined to fill out the paperwork because he didn't want his mother to get a telegram and worry that he'd been hurt. So he actually never got his Purple Heart. That's very Grandpa Yogi. If you know anything about my grandpa, that is very Grandpa Yogi. Don't worry, I'm fine. It's just a flesh wound.
How do you know all of this in such detail? And I ask you that. So I've had various people on the show to talk about their role in a Fox Nation series. And sometimes I can tell, like, oh, they know enough to get by in the series to say what they needed to say and then promote it. You clearly know the details of your grandfather's life so well. How and why? Were you always... And the why I ask, not disrespectfully. I think a lot of grandchildren don't know the full extent of what their grandparents did because they didn't talk about it or whatever. They didn't have the level of curiosity. You know a lot about your grandpa.
So I wholeheartedly agree. A lot of people don't take the time to find out about their grandparents. So my parents got divorced when I was 5. My grandparents became like a second set of parents to me, like from a babysitting perspective and a helping out perspective. And I was incredibly lucky to have my Grammy Carmen and my Grandpa Yogi until I was 37 and 39 years old, respectively. A lot of kids don't get that opportunity to grow up with their grandparents and have more than just a grandpa-granddaughter relationship. We were friends. There was nothing that I didn't tell them. I also was a reporter for forever. I was at ESPN Magazine for many years. I was there before you got there, and then I was at MLB.com and MLB Network. So it was my job to ask questions, and I just felt that I knew he was an amazing human. I knew he was this incredible baseball player, but I knew he had done these other things, right? And I just wanted to know. He did not talk a lot about the war. A lot of what I know about what he did in the war is kind of superficial. You know, Grandpa, if you tried to get him to talk about the D-Day invasion, he would tell you it was like the 4th of July. It was not like the 4th of July. This is what he would say to get you to shut up and change the subject and start talking about something else, so he didn't have to relive those memories. But I took an interest. I'm incredibly proud of him. I think he, as great as he was as a baseball player, I think that his yogiisms and his big personality kind of overshadowed his skill on the field. And I want people to remember how good he was as a player. I want people to remember that he was a veteran of World War II. I want them to know about this, amazing 65-year love story he had with my Grammy Carmen. He was so much more than just a ball player, and the way he lived his life was really an example for folks. I always say he was the best at what he did multiple times over without ever for a second thinking he was better than anybody else. He never lost his humility, his goodness. And I think that's what so endears him to people nowadays. And for folks who don't know these other things about him, yourself included, I want them to know and I want them to remember. And that's why I, kind of yap about it a lot.
Yeah. No, it's awesome to hear. It's interesting. The public persona of Yogi Berra is what you just talked about, is largely probably dominated by the yogiisms. It's the personality. But when it came to his service, all of a sudden, not so much. All of a sudden, didn't want to talk so much. Do you think that was driven out of what you said, like not wanting to relive those memories? Was it driven out of trauma? Was it driven out of humility? I wonder sometimes, like, is that, I did this, but a lot of other guys did other more amazing things. So it's a kind of a humility element to, I shouldn't be bragging or talking about this in any kind of important way.
I think it is a humility thing, but I also think that at that time, it wasn't a question of, are you going to serve? You're going to serve. This is where the country is. The country needs you. Everybody's going to do it. That guy's doing it. That guy's doing it. That guy's doing it. Women are signing up to work in munitions factories and do what they can do. Everybody is contributing to this war effort. So, like, why are you bragging? We're all doing it, right? It was what everybody. That's why they call it the greatest generation, right?
It doesn't make you special. We all did this.
We all did it, but it took it definitely took a special mentality at that time that I don't think we really have as much in this country. Like, you're going to do this. This is what your life is going to look like. It's not your choice, but this is the right choice, and this is what you're going to do. So I don't think it was something to brag about. I do think afterwards it was fairly traumatic to look back. I mean, you don't pull thousands of dead bodies out of the water and not leave a changed person and feel lucky and grateful for every day that you have after that, right? He fully knew that he had a chance to come home and live his life and get married and have children and become a baseball player, play a kid's game for a living, when so many men did not make it off of that beach, right? So I think every day for the rest of his life, he felt like he had gotten away with something, and maybe it wasn't something to brag about, right? I say a lot too, people talk about my grandpa as like one of the greatest clutch hitters in the history of baseball, and how did he handle the pressure so well? When you're at bat with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth and the bases loaded, that's not pressure to someone who has lived through the Normandy invasion. That is opportunity. You get a chance to stand up there and drive in those runs and win that game. What are you going to be stressed out about, right? You could have gone the other way.
Right.
So I think that his participation in World War II really did very much color the rest of his life. And, they talk about today people just practicing gratitude, but he didn't have to do that. He lived every day grateful for the fact that he was just simply on this earth after seeing what he saw and doing what he did on D-Day.
And then after D-Day, and tell us a little bit about Fields of Valor. Like, how much do you focus on that day versus, you told us some of his military service at World War II, during World War II, even in the media aftermath of D-Day, what he did afterwards. So what will we see in Fields of Valor?
In Fields of Valor, it's a lot of just me and my dad talking about, Grandpa's service. And there's a lot of great old some photos and footage. And then obviously they do talk about Grandpa's, baseball career after the war. I think we even talk a little bit about my grandfather's museum, the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center, which is, I'm in New Jersey. It's here on the campus of Montclair State University. But you guys had some footage, I think, that even my dad and I hadn't seen. So it's the Fields of Valor episode is definitely worth checking out. It was cool to see all those photos and the black and white footage, and even and some of the footage of the LCSSs and the D-Day invasion itself. It was cool.
Well, I'm sorry we never met at ESPN. I think you said you were gone before I got there, so we didn't overlap. We didn't miss in the hallways in Bristol, but I wish we would have. And this has been an awesome conversation. We'll make sure we'll check out Fields of Valor Episode 1 on Yogi Berra and Lindsay Berra. Thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Take care, Lindsay. A lot of times on this show, we talk about different pieces of content, people talking about their book or this episode of this. And I can honestly tell you today, like, I intend to consume both of these pieces of content, like Fox Nation's Fields of Valor, focusing on Yogi Berra, and They're Coming for You by new book by Jason Chaffetz. I mean, if that didn't pique your curiosity on both, I don't know. You do have a holiday weekend coming up. Might as well indulge your curiosity. Thanks for hanging out with us here today. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll see you again, same time, same place again next time.